Coach PJ here. Are you one of those strong personalities that's good at decision making, a natural leader, likes to drive things to results, very results focused? Well, if you are, it's a wonderful trait to have, yet it has the flip side to that coin, is one that you're often telling folks what you want, telling folks what you want to get done, telling folks how to do things. And that telling can cause other issues. Although it is a sense of leadership that you do have a strong sense of what needs to get done, you have that element of structure, you can see how to get to the result. What happens with those strong personalities, and I happen to have that same trait, is you have to smooth off the edges a little bit. And what I mean by that is when you tell folks what to do, when you are commanding or directive, what happens is they have the opportunity to take in that information and make a decision. They can decide whether or not it's a valid assertion, whether or not they want to do it or not. It's kind of a binary. They can choose to take it in or not if you make an assumption, if you make an assertion. Instead, if you're trying to get something done, think about when do you need to be actually directive and clear and very precise in that, and when do you want that person to take accountability for what's happening? When do you want them to have ownership and to have the ability to take it on? Because when you tell folks what to do, they believe, and they can often take it in as that I will do exactly what they tell me to do. It doesn't often leave a lot of room for creativity or thinking or judgment or going above and beyond and building it out as their own because they believe they're on a directive from yourself and that's what they're trying to meet. So it tends to limit that. So instead of giving a directive, think about how do you ask a powerful question? How do you engage them in a different conversation that allows them to be part of the solution, them to take ownership, and therefore the solution rests in them. And if they run into a speed bump, if something happens that they have to make a judgment call, they don't have to come back to you to say, it didn't happen exactly as you thought, what do I do now? They have the empowerment to know what their objective is and what they're trying to get done, and they can get rid of the speed bumps. They can overcome the speed bumps. They can make some judgment calls. They can still get them to the end result because you've painted a picture around what you want to get done or how it gets done is in their hands. Let me give you a couple examples because I had this yesterday with a couple of clients. Actually, I have a couple of strong personality clients or strong dominant clients. And one was in the process of transitioning between two job roles. They had two people and they were swapping out the roles and they were changing the roles for them and made the declaration that, okay, we're ready to switch, let's go. And the dominant personality doesn't always look at the details. And what that meant to one of the people receiving that directive is that, okay, now you're doing this work and you're doing this work, is that they could drop the other work. They didn't have to be responsible for it. And there was definitely some gaps that existed. And the details of how to make that transition weren't worked out well enough. So the person taking the directive just said, okay, I'm no longer responsible for that, and kind of wiped their hands clear of it. And the other person was left holding the bag or struggling a little bit. And it caused some gaps and some friction and some customer service issues. Instead, had the owner said, we're making this transition, what do you think needs to happen to make this successful? Or before we can finalize the transition, or before you can take on this role, what are all the things that need to happen? Why don't the two of you work through what are all those details that need to happen so that we can make the transition smoothly, and give me an update? That puts the onus on those individuals to have those conversations. It doesn't mean you don't have oversight. It doesn't mean you don't get engaged. It just means that they now own, okay, what are all the details? How does this work? I want to go to this. And they're not taking a directive from you that is such an absolute that causes them to say, well, I did exactly what you told me to do. No. I didn't mean you to do it at the cost of customer service or at the cost of if there were things that would have been missed. But that's not what you said. You said, you now have this responsibility and you now have that responsibility. Especially because the more directive people do not get into the details the same way that we often think about others getting into the details. That personality style, that behavioral style, doesn't tend to spend a lot of time on the details where others might. So that's one example. Another example is if you're finding that someone isn't performing or isn't aligning to what you want the job to look like or what you want accomplished in a particular position, asking them questions as to how to correct that engages them at a different level. If you ask them or talk to them about whether or not they're doing it or not, or whether or not this is getting accomplished, they end up in a defensive mode, or they end up validating or giving you reasons for why it has happened this way. Well, I was working on this, or I was working on that, or I thought this was a bigger priority, which is fine. And it's not that that isn't the case, but you're trying to problem solve to say, how do we balance different priorities and how are you prioritizing? And even just asking those simple questions, help me understand your priorities today, this week. I have a new estimate, a new bid, a new prospect that I want you to follow up on. How do you see that fitting into your calendar? How do you see that getting accomplished based on all the other priorities you have? And you didn't just tell him to go do this. You actually engage them in, how does this going to work? How's it going to fit into your calendar? Where is it in the priorities? And instead of dictating that, you engage them and have them problem solve, how am I going to get this done with everything else on my plate? Even asking questions like, what won't get done because I'm asking you to do this? So if you have a strong personality, slow down a little bit. That's going to be hard. And think about, how do you ask a powerful question? How do you engage folks rather than tell folks? That will be a game changer for you. If you like what you hear, subscribe, like, comment below. And I'm helping you here to get you the business you deserve, your business profit. Until next time.